right, tonight is Wednesday, October 6th, 2021. This is 7 p.m. Committee of the Whole meeting for District 96. Kathy, can you call the roll?
Okay, Ms. Gunn?
Here.
Ms. Clyber?
Here.
Ms. Murphy?
Here.
Mr. Marhol?
Here.
Mr. Barsadi?
Present.
Mr. Muirhead?
Here.
And Mr. Hunt?
Here.
Okay, the quorum is present.
All right, great. At this time, is there any public comment?
There is none.
Okay. Are there any proposed changes to the agenda? All right, and if not, then we will go right to committee reports. First committee listed is facilities.
Thanks, Dan. The facilities committee or advisory committee, I always get fuzzy on this one, especially because Jim just sent something out. FAC met last month on the 20th, discussed a few things of importance. One is looking at the Blythe and the potential of an addition there. And the initial assessment is that it is much easier from a village perspective and a historic preservation perspective to do work within the existing envelope of the building. And that's because the building is historic. It was one of the first modern schools built by or designed by Perkins and Will. And it's easier to do renovation work, additions within the envelope. And so the first thing we'll be looking at is the potential of additional space in the auditorium. We've asked the architect to look at some ballpark conceptual level costs as we move forward. Then the other thing we talked about was the assessment process and whether or not, in which direction we're going to go with that. Specifically, we know that our facilities need continuous maintenance, and as we discussed a couple months ago, we do know that we would, to continue to maintain those in good condition, we do need a better understanding of where we're at right now. So the challenge there is, do we do a very in-depth process with one firm, or do we do one that might be a little bit lighter on the in-depthness, but certainly less expensive? And Ramesh is here, and I think he'll add to my words, certainly. Then the other items we discussed, Hauser Auditorium. We do have kind of a timeline where we've got that grant money, so we do need to make some decisions just in terms of where are we going with this. Again, we asked DLA to develop an MOU to look at their investigation to see where we're at right now and then potential design options. And then lastly, the sprinkler is functional, very good. It was approved. There were some minor issues with pumps and other things that broke, but I think the flow test was what I have written down, Ramesh. And that covers it mostly. Oh, and then Hollywood had a little bit of an extension because of some delay issues.
I think we're going to have Ramesh give us an update on Hollywood, because I was just been curious about the status too.
So first let me talk about the assessments that Joel just mentioned. So we're going to invite two firms to present at the next board meeting on the 20th. We extended invitations to DLA and Terracom to give us 15-minute presentations on the in-depth versus the lighter type of assessments. Just the quality side, we're not talking costs, just so that the board can understand what we would get if we decide to go with an in-depth as against what we would get if we do a lighter touch. This will help us establish short-term, mid-term, and long-term capital improvement programs for the district. So we'll have that at the next board meeting, two of them. The next issue is with regards to the updates on the projects. First, on Central, the village and the fire marshal had asked us to conduct an additional flow test to confirm whether we were getting adequate water supply from the village. And the second test confirmed that we do have adequate flow, but it's not reaching the building at that same pressure. And while we passed all the tests that are required by code and what the village requires, there is a slight supplement that the fire marshal is asking us to meet the 150% goal that I discussed last time. But we're trying to convince him that we should deal with this as a separate project because from a code standpoint, we meet the safety requirements. And if we have to fix this, we actually have to replace the water line coming in from the village supply across the street on South Court all the way into the building. It's a fairly major project because we have to excavate almost 300 feet. And this could be part of the central upgrades project and if we decide to take it up next year. But there is no emergency to do it right now. We have submitted all our data to the fire marshal and the inspector. We hope to hear back from them in the next couple of weeks. So we are just waiting on their reply for that one. But otherwise, Central is complete. It's been punch listed. All systems are go. Everything's complete on the job. So the final invoice is about to be reviewed and processed in the next 30 days. Hollywood, on the other hand, has remained a challenge for us. There are multiple issues that we faced. I discussed this at the last meeting. I indicated that we had a supply chain issue where we were getting materials in the wrong sequence. For example, we were getting some of the elements that we needed last, we were getting them first, and there's no place to store it either, so it was an issue. And now, every commitment that was made to us last month has essentially fallen apart, and we're starting to get stuff that we really don't want right now. But we have proceeded to install what we can as soon as we got it. For example, the fence is already up. If you notice that, we had even moved to the process of leveling the surfaces so that we could pave. But then we ran into the biggest hiccup that we faced, that was this morning. The Village of Brookfield and MWRD have stepped in and said that they never inspected the project, so they've asked us to dig it up, and they want to view the pipes that were placed. So we started doing test pits for them today. And part of the problem out here is that the Village of Brookfield could have come and inspected the pipes at any time. We had submitted for permits 4 months ago, but they chose not to come. But unfortunately, it's still our problem that they didn't show up, and we were putting back the soils and the base layer of stone. So they've asked us to expose as many as 17 pits that they want to view at the site. So we started doing that this morning. And the other part of it is it's a very tight site, so we have a concrete issue. That means to meet ADA, the slopes that are required, the running slope and the cross slope, are very tight parameters. I mean, you can only have a maximum of so many percentage in the running direction and only 2% in the cross slopes. We are talking about 1/16 of an inch, half an inch, 1/8 of an inch. These numbers are very hard to do unless you have a quality concrete contractor. I hate to say this, but we don't have the best concrete contractor. So he's going to replace the concrete for the third time to fix this issue. So we've had a lot of hiccups on this process. We're doing a lot of hand-holding right now. We are doing all the markups for them. We are telling them, okay, we're going to lay out the grades for you. Just meet that. That's it. It's their job to do this. Typically, we don't do means and methods, but we are doing that for this case because it's the only way we can get this project finished, because now we're running into a time challenge and weather issue, because the asphalt plants will close in the next 3 to 4 weeks, and then we won't be able to finish the paving. MWRD will remain a challenge unless they issue us a go ahead and pave. And we're trying our best to get this cleared up in the next 5 to 7 days so that we can pave. But it's going to be a challenge because they are being very contentious on multiple issues there. But otherwise, the interior of the building is getting a lot better. I mean, we finished, the casework is finished, the ceilings are getting completed right now. So we're making good progress on that part of it. So the if all goes well, we would still be able to get occupancy in the multipurpose room by the end of October. That's if everything goes well, perfectly. Otherwise, the project is going to extend into middle of November, which is not our goal. But there's a very good possibility that could happen unless we get a lot of cooperation. So it's been a challenge, to say the least.
Well, I wonder then, what happens if we get to a point where you said in the next 3 or 4 weeks, the asphalt plants are closing and we don't have things paved, or it sounds like we have equipment or parts that are probably best not left outside in the elements in the middle of winter. So I'm wondering, what are contingency plans do we have?
So we will finish the building. The building will not be affected by the weather because we are weather tight. We are close to being weather tight right now because we have the curtain wall has been installed. So we can finish the interior of the building. It's the exterior which we can't finish if we are challenged by weather. So the asphalt, if we miss the deadline of the plants, we would have to wait till spring of next year. That would be a challenge. It means you can't park in there, but we can use the building beneficially. Yes.
Ramesh, did Brookfield or MWRD give an explanation as to the delay in the inspections and any reasoning behind their decision in October?
We can only speculate because the process is that we submit the drawings to them. They actually use an outside consultant to review the drawings. They do not review it internally themselves. That outside consultant is given 3 to 4 weeks to review it. And his excuse was that he had other work. So by the time we got their comments back, which was, I'm not kidding you, it was 2 weeks ago when we got their first set of comments. Most of them were minor comments, but the fact is that he said that he was not going to inspect the site till he got through the paperwork. And now he's saying that you already covered up everything, expose it. I mean, I tried to explain to him that we were under a 4-month rush to get the school finished. If we were to wait for you, we would still be in foundations.
So I'm assuming that that is not the normal procedure that you usually engage with the village?
Typically, we do have a longer period of construction. We have 6 to 8 months. So we do work ahead of permits.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, because of the time crunch, it looks like we went ahead of him. Yes, there is some fault that we have in the sense that we went ahead at risk that we did this, but they did not cooperate, did not help us. They knew that this building was coming up. The permit was put in early May. We submitted the drawings to them in early May, and for them to react to it in September, after 4.5 months, was a bit of a challenge.
Did you alert them when the final installation was being completed before you covered it up?
Yes, we did, because MWRD has to come and do an inspection. We are required to do that. So the gentleman, his name is George, he came to the site 2 weeks ago, but he said that, hey, you already started to cover up stuff out here because we said we need to pay. We said we'd have to proceed. But we left some portions uncovered, but he was not happy with it. So he went back and told the consultant that it's your call, and the consultant basically said, expose everything. So today we were pretty much digging up the site again to expose the pipework. And we have to hope that there's no challenge from that. I mean, that would be a bigger problem if they say that they're not happy with what's been installed. But as of right now, the civil engineer, WT, said that it looks like it's okay, but you never know. They can always pick on something.
So is this extra cost to the district at this point?
No, it isn't.
Okay.
Because it's still on the contract because they're not supposed to move ahead. I do have some sympathy with them on this point because they're trying to finish the job. I mean, they've been sitting doing nothing for 4 months then if they have to wait for the permit. They knew that it was at risk, but the thing is that I think we've done the right thing so far, but we do need the village to be a bit more helpful. I mean, to put additional burdens on us would be a challenge because we're running into winter. There's no way we can do civil work in winter. We can't dig up the site once it freezes. We won't be able to do work till next spring if they challenge us.
Is there any way to work with the Brookfield leadership or anyone to expedite the process in any way, or is that just moot at this point?
At this point, it's moot. I mean, part of the reason why we ran into this issue is because if you recall, we had a zoning change that we made for this project, which is still about a year away from getting finalized. The whole process of how we set about doing this project. So part of the thing where the village of Brookfield is pushing back at us is saying that we are looking at the 1-year time frame, so this is not really late for us. Even though we are under construction, they're saying we are looking at the 1-year time frame, not the 4-month time frame. So they're saying that they're okay. So, but they're just not helping us, is what I'm saying, you know, get there. So.
If, as is very possible, the site's not complete, is the village going to give us a hard time about using the school the way we need to use it?
No, because we will get beneficial occupancy of the building itself.
Okay.
Yes, we'll get that. We won't be able to use the site.
The parking lot?
Yes, and we've already made, as Daniel answer to your question, we have an emergency exit that we have created, so because we are required to do that as a second means of exit and egress. We've created an exit that the children can use in an emergency. It's active right now. We'll have to keep that active through the construction phase.
So ultimately, if the site was unfinished, then the real issue becomes where do we put the parking?
Correct. Cars would have to still continue to park off-site.
And I'm sorry, Joel, you maybe asked that, but the village is okay with us parking on the street for those spaces? Or have you asked that to the village?
Right now, all parking around the school is limited to teachers. There is no parking for others.
But the village had already put in that new signage
Yeah.
that's for teachers, that's for staff parking in front of the school, so the staff have been parking in front of the school and at the zoo. Right there.
But do we
That is
have,
correct.
but
We
do we have
have-
enough space though for them to park in the
Yes.
spaces that we've allocated?
That plus the zoo, the street plus the zoo is really what we had allocated. We were allocating a pretty small number in the parking lot, if you recall.
Right, no, I recall that, yeah.
Yeah, is there anyone that doesn't fall into that teacher category that's parking there?
I think it says staff, so anybody that has the Riverside placard is what they're allowing.
But we have the 15 spots at the zoo.
Mhm.
So that is the Hollywood project, that is a challenge. But I think we'll get through it, but, you know, there's good days and bad days, but today was a bad day.
No.
Well, and then, I'm trying to think, was it a week or two ago where we had that, was it a gas line that was punctured?
Mhm.
Yes, so the lucky part of that, again, that was again, this is the right place to find. They indicated to us that they had called Julie. Julie is the agency that comes and marks out all the utilities before you do any work. We were planning to do the fence installation, if you recall, that weekend, because it's a process of digging holes in this on site. And unfortunately, they did not call Julie. So that's why we penalized the contractor. It was totally on their dime. The lucky part for us was they hit the smallest line that was feeding HCA, which was a 3/4 inch line. And People's Gas basically told us that you're lucky, it's a small thing. They fixed it within 45 minutes, and we dodged a bullet up there. But the fence is up now. But again, that's out of sequence, because now it actually makes it much more challenging to put the playground equipment in, because we have the fence up.
Was that a subcontractor that made this error?
Yes, but the contractor is ultimately responsible to mark out the site. And we had asked them just 2 days before that, did you call Julie? And they said, yes, they flagged it out. They did. So it's been a challenge with this contractor. I mean, they have 3 superintendents on site, and still it's a challenge.
Thank you for dealing with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I have. Is that nice?
That covers all my start items.
Really quickly, so you had mentioned the whole time that all the supply chain issues. Are there any more delays that we weren't expecting with anything?
Yeah,
or-
so for example, on the curtain wall, if you recall, there are 2 parts to it. We have the fixed glass and the operable windows. Initially, they told us that fixed glass will be here, and the operable windows and the thermal door, the main entry door, would be arriving in end of October. They shipped the operable window last week, and now they said the door is November. So we have this thing flip-flopping constantly. The playground equipment, for example, the equipment shipped, the hardware didn't. Yes, so that was, we spoke to Stephanie from Imagination yesterday, and she said that the hardware will ship on Friday.
So I do have one question going back to the inspection. Is that date set? Do we have a date set that the consultant's going to come out and do the inspection
For the,
for the pipes?
they were there today.
Oh, they were there today, okay,
Yes.
okay.
we had the entire, we had our civil engineer,
Okay.
we had their contractor, we had, MWRD was there, and the consultant was there today.
Okay.
It's just that, we are at their mercy in the sense that they could have actually asked us to dig up the entire site.
Mhm. Okay.
But they told us, just do these 17 pits,
Mhm.
and then give us the data on that, and hopefully we have no mistakes. Because we have no mistakes in that, then they'll say, okay, it looks like we installed it correctly.
All right.
17 still seems like a lot to me.
It is, it's a lot of pits. It's a very difficult, because you can damage the pipe very easily when you have.
Absolutely, when you're digging it.
How long does it typically take them, like they were out there today and you provided them with the data, how long does it typically take them to provide us with like their final determination that?
So we
Oh.
finished digging the 17 pits today. We did that all today we had to dig 8 by hand because we couldn't get the equipment in there, but it's all done. So one of the advantages, I would say that one of the leeways that he gave us is he let our engineer collect the data and present it to them. He said that he doesn't have time to do it. He said, as far as our engineer from WT, Jason, he was on site today, he took the measurements. Now he has to go back and do the calculations and submit that. Typically this is done by the contractor, but we ended up doing it because we just want to get this thing going. So Jason would submit this tomorrow or day after to MWRD. If it meets, Jason knows what they're looking for, so the idea is that we will pass, we get that through. Then we again have their mercy to see how long will it take for them to stamp the document and say, you're good. There is no way of pushing them. They sat on this for 4 months, and now they'll say, you can wait another 2 weeks.
And so who's going to stamp that document? Is that the consultant or is that Brookfield?
WT has to stamp it saying that it meets all the thresholds of his own design. Normally we let the contractor has to meet our design,
Mhm.
but now Jason has to stamp it and say that it was installed as per plan and specs and use that as the data.
Okay.
And does any of this affect, so assuming the remainder of the equipment comes in for the playground to actually assemble it, does any of this affect the ability to start?
It does.
Okay.
We are not going to install the playground because the pipes are right there.
Oh, right there.
Yes,
That was
so
it.
we have to get past this. In fact, in a way, the hardware missing was helpful because if we had installed the playground, we would have been getting the
Okay.
playground
Okay.
stuff up. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Nothing in Hollywood is easy.
No, it doesn't seem that way.
Right, so.
But we'll get there.
So this all seems like very specific series of events to this project and challenges that we have. But are there any broader learnings with like future projects that have you done this or that a little bit differently? Or it doesn't sound like there's really anything we could have done differently.
Oh, yes. There are lessons learned from every project, but the key is to take it and implement it. That's the most important thing. So the one thing that I realized is having a base set of qualifications for a contractor is very dangerous. We went with the lowest bid, and he met the threshold of all that, but we didn't have the chance to qualify his subcontractors, which was very difficult to do at that time, but knowing what they are capable of doing, we would never have qualified any of their subcontractors. It
Okay.
was so poor. That's one lesson learned. The second thing is, last year what we managed to do when we built this was a one-off project. It was a very challenging schedule, but we pulled it off. We had a much more experienced contractor, and somehow COVID did not affect supply chains. This year, I don't think Berglund could have done this project in 4 months. So the other lesson learned is that a tight schedule with no flexibility, we had nothing. We had no, extra days. It was like you end the day before school opens was the best case scenario that we had. Is a risk that you undertake. So you have to build in some kind of leeway to at least have a project that is fees that you can actually complete in the time. You can't just say, let's take a risk and let's see if we can finish it. You have to build in the schedule so that you have some kind of like a backstop saying that we can work all through this time. Right now we're just on an open-ended schedule, which is not the way we should be functioning.
Yeah.
We really need to get this project out because it's costing, it's costing DLA money, it's costing the contractor money. I mean, they know it too. It's costing them money because they have their crews out there. And so it's not the right way of doing construction. So I think the lesson learned is that if we start a project, for example, at Blythe, we know that we have to, suppose we are doing that two-section project, and it's again a summer project, we should be very clear as to what our goals are, what we intend to do, what we can expect, and build that into our schedule. We should not undertake a project and say, let's hope for the best. That's what happened here.
Okay. And you already answered my second question, which was really around the comment about the concrete contractor, because I think you had very positive things to say about the Berglund contractors, and that was much more detailed, I remember, when we were going through that. And I was just curious, because we do have to go, it's the lowest qualified bidder, so does known quality of work, what we know about a bidder, regardless of whether they're low or they meet the standards or whatever, could we knock them out because of like a history of poor quality? So it sounds like we didn't have the opportunity to really vet out the trades as you went.
Two things gone our way. I mean, we need to find out what the public bidding process is from Brian Crowley, number one, because he's very fixed on the way he said you can't just throw out people just because you don't like them. You have to build standards that are applicable to everyone.
Okay.
It has to be the same threshold. And we did have that, but it does not go into the depth of subcontractors because we asked for a lump sum bid. The contractor does not show us the list of subcontractors unless he gets the job.
Okay.
So once we get the job and we see the list and we say, oh, we don't like your concrete guy, he's going to say, then you're going to pay me $25,000 more to get the next guy. Then we are starting to lose out in the process. So we have to have an ability to say that you need to identify not all your contractors, but at least 5 we can list, like the steel, the concrete. We need to see those people. We have to modify our bidding process. That's number one. Number two, as we recall, we bid this project in early April. We came to the board for approval in the 3rd week of April. So there was hardly any time between opening bids, qualifying the contractors, and making a recommendation. I mean, but that was our timeline. We had a very tight timeline because we wanted to get underway in May. If you remember, we wanted to get the long lead time items underway by the 1st week in May. So part of the process is we should understand that when we get into these kind of projects, there's a risk. And evaluate the risk for completion, quality, and who are we bidding to? I mean, we could not attract Berglund to do this job. It was too small for them. So we are going to attract the second tier. Interestingly, the project I thought was going to be a huge challenge was Central, but Tandem just flew through it. They just were so organized. They just knew what they were doing. They had it down. They stuck to their schedule. They were really good about it. It turned out to be really good. But Apex, who came with a huge history of school projects, they have done $30 million projects in the city. But if you do a slightly in-depth review of them, they have never worked a second time with any client. I asked them, I told them, so which of the other schools you did in the city? They said they haven't done. I said, you got a $30 million project and you never did a second school? I'm sure if I call, they'll say they'll never work with this guy again. That would be the challenge. But, you know, some of this you live and learn, you know, I mean, the process, I mean, they did bid a good number to us. I mean, it was below our budget. They did bid a time, and they haven't come back with any additional costs except for the legitimate cost that we had with the storage tank issue. I'm still reviewing that cost. We haven't yet finalized that. And the minor electrical and the utility changes that we made. But those were minor costs compared. So we're still well within budget, but from a schedule standpoint, we really are behind.
Can I ask a question about, the modified bidding process that you're talking about, with more in-depth questioning for contractors? I know obviously there are other school districts and publicly funded institutions that have these same kind of projects. Do you know from your experience, like how do other districts deal with that? Are they all doing an additional modified questioning of their contractors, or what's
Yes,
the
they
norm?
do. They do, but you also need to make sure that you meet the goals that are legal. I mean, there are a lot of things that we cannot do.
Qualified.
Yes, we can't do that, and we cannot just pick out contractors because we don't like their name or, but definitely we can ask them for bid information. For example, I still am not sure about this, whether if Apex's references had come back poorly, whether we could have kicked them out. I don't know the answer to that question. But on a public bid, typically, they met the bonding capacity that we asked for. There were thresholds we asked for monetary numbers. They met them all when they bid the project. So I think Brian would tell us that you can't kick them out just because you don't like, the fact they poured poor concrete some other place. But if we tell them that they never finished the last 8 jobs in time, maybe that's grounds for kicking them out.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't know what the rules are. We need to educate ourselves on that. I'm sorry, I don't know what the thresholds are, but Brian typically is very strict about what you can use to throw out a contract. Because the lowest responsible bid is still the threshold, but how do you define that responsiveness
Right.
is the difficult.
In history of work, I mean, is a huge thing, just in my mind, like my personal money, I want somebody, I'll pay more for somebody that knows what they're doing, they can stay on time, it's quality work, and you don't have to deal with all the rest of it, but it's a little different. That's why I was just curious, like, how that process works. So we probably need to get some more information for the next round.
I think it'd be very beneficial to talk, I don't know if Brian would talk with us or someone about what these.
We do need to, we
I
definitely
think
need to.
that's the next step for us if we're going to continue any more projects. So what really are processes that we go through to choose these people. And
Yeah.
sometimes you're only left with so many people depending, like you said, you have 4 months project,
One of the things was,
It's a tight timeline.
Yeah, to
tight-
get,
tight,
obviously, you can get Berlin, but
Yeah.
I think it'd be useful at least to learn more.
so actually Berglund did come back to us and said that, why don't you extend our contract and we would have done this project. I did tell them that you couldn't have come back with $2.5 million, but we would not have awarded you the project. I mean, they are a better contractor, no doubt, but their costs are much higher too. I just said, I don't think we can issue you a change order for $2.5 million on your base contract, and Brian would have said, no way. It exceeds a 10% threshold.
And with some of our upcoming projects being smaller, like with the central estimated cost at 8 million, I mean, what kind of contractor does that, I mean, would that bring a Berglund in, or is that
Oh, yeah.
still too, yeah?
Oh
Okay.
yeah, I think once you get beyond about 3, you can
Three,
get,
okay.
you get a lot of the better, because the general conditions is the big cost, that's the overhead.
Mhm.
On this project, if Berglund's overhead would have been 35% of the project, and that's why they could not have done, because the
Okay.
full-time supervision that they have, it makes a big difference. These guys are not, most of these are not union guys, they're just paying prevailing wages.
Mhm.
So-
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much. All right. Joel, anything else?
No, I think we've,
Covered a lot this evening. All right. All right, thanks. Next, then we'll take us to the Finance Committee.
Yeah, so Mr. Fenton and Martha and I met was it last week to discuss this. And we were just looking at this as it sort of relates to the strategic plan. And looking at the strategic plan, I guess the big thing is, to me, it's a fairly simplistic goal for the finances. It's essentially to maintain like fiscal responsibility, be responsible to not only the children, like providing a quality education, a safe environment, but also being responsible to the taxpayers. So, but when sort of looking at this, when we look at goals 1 through 4, I think what we need to do, at least from a finance committee, and what I'd like us to start doing, not necessarily tonight, but just to start thinking about it, is taking the strategic plan that we have and then prioritizing what we're looking to do. Because there's a lot in that strategic plan. I mean, we have full-day kindergarten in there. We have the Central Hauser campus that we're looking at. We're looking at the Bike Park addition. I mean, there's a multitude of things that we're trying to do. And what I'd like to do is for us to prioritize what's important. Because we can't do everything at once. And for us to have the administration go out and say, start like investigating what's important and looking at like what something's going to cost or what the details involved, I think we're going to be wasting a lot of energy like a lot of energy on things that could be better spent if we just prioritize and put together a priority list. So I'm just making this stuff up. So late kindergarten is first. So we prioritize and say, okay, these are the top initiatives we want to undertake.
I mean, we're working towards full-day kindergarten. We haven't made a determination on that yet.
Again, but I'm just throwing, because all these items have some sort of cost to it. I mean, full-day kindergarten, we not only have to look at staff, but we look at facilities. Do we have space? Do we have to do additional work? I mean, obviously, the Blythe Park addition, the Central Park, I mean.
So isn't the prioritization of the steps in this happening through some of the additional work?
I
Like,
think
isn't that
what's-
the next step that we're working on? Each of these action teams are talking about kind of getting that so that
So
bring
one
to
of the
the
things
board?
that I'll just interject is that we talked about is that it's all important. That's how it ended up in the strategic plan. It's over a 5-year range. And some things, like some of the facilities work is the example, right? Like some of those things, that's not delineated in the strategic plan. It's, sort of safe, clean, flexible learning environments. That's what's delineated. So certainly there are choices, and full-day kindergarten is yet to be a choice, right? So to use that example, the action team, and I know Angela's just going to give us a brief update. The action team has met, I believe, twice already. So one time and one time tomorrow, coming up soon. So right, no decisions have been made really on any of it, but I think what David's saying is all of it represents things that have the potential to cost additional dollars,
Right.
To the district.
Well,
in terms
and
of
Martha,
modified programming in different ways.
I think something you said is important, and this idea that everything is important, well, then nothing's important.
Exactly.
So to Dave's point, we are going to have to make some decisions,
Yes.
and there's parameters that we will consider, and fund balance is one of them, and taxes are another one, and those are big things that
And
are
also-
going to play into this.
And so sort of to that end, what I'd like to do is just for, like, maybe put together something like a magic quadrant, like sort of rank things like ease of implementation and the value benefit, so that like something that's easy to implement and has a high value, that's like the low-hanging fruit, we tackle that right away. But to sort of start plotting things that might be, that are important, and then just sort of prioritize what we want to tackle, like first, within the first year, within the first 2 years, within the first 3 years. Because, I mean, technically, if you look, depending on like how much of our fund balance we want, we could probably tackle everything. But we're not going to, because we're not going to take the fund balance down to irresponsible levels. But we're also going to have to start looking at this when we start looking at some of these things, especially the bigger capital projects, I am going to want to have a discussion about the importance of debt. I mean, I know we're going to be paying off the debt, our loan in next month, actually, because it's October. But do we want to maybe consider debt for like the Central Hauser campus, for Blythe Park addition? I mean, debt does have a purpose, and it is something that we should probably, at the very least, consider. I mean, I can't think of one school district that actually like wrote a $19-20 million check to do what we just did. I mean, with the facilities, without like going to debt, going to referendum, we wrote a check. And so we still have a healthy reserve, but with all that we're trying to do, we should at least consider that as a possible avenue to complete some of the things that we're looking to do. So that's how I would like to approach the finance. I mean, obviously we need to keep a healthy fund balance. We need to be fiscally responsible. I am comfortable with what the policy says of 40% reserves. But I do think we can just sort of start prioritizing how we want to approach this in like year 1, year 2, year 3, so that if like, again, hypothetically, let's say kindergarten, full day kindergarten, like Bob's not here, but he's probably gonna watch the video. Don't quote me on this, but if like full day kindergarten fell to year 4, we know where that is in the list. And I'm not saying we do that, I'm just saying that's where we just need to prioritize. So that's what I'd like this board to start doing.
I would definitely like to start having conversations about, we are talking about these big projects, Central, Blythe, things that are on the pipeline that we would, ideally like to get done. So we do need to have the financial conversation soon about that, because we do not have the fund balance to pay for all of that and still maintain a healthy reserve. We don't. So what are our options? And where is the board at on that? Because that is going to determine what projects we're even willing to consider. Because if there's what, 8 million at Central, you know, several million, but like, it's a lot of money, so we need to decide sooner than later, we need to have that conversation so that we know that whether we're going to pursue those or not. If we're a board who says we don't want any debt, then those projects are going to look very different than what we're planning now. So I would support having that conversation. In terms of priorities, I completely agree with you, but I want to make sure that those conversations just aren't at the board table, but are informed by these action teams, because I think that's where, within the strategic plan, a lot of, you know, they have the expertise there. So I want to make sure our prioritization is based on the expertise of our action teams. That's my...
I would argue, though, that whether or not the financial means is there, and whether that is taxes or debt or fund balance issues, we also need to be able to do what Dave said, which is, what's the cost benefit? Is
Absolutely.
$8 million a worthwhile spend? And that's,
Absolutely.
it ends up seeming really easy because it doesn't come directly out of our pockets, I guess, as individuals. Mostly I'm supporting what you're saying.
Well, it would be good to get feedback from the administration as well, particularly, I think Dave, you mentioned at one point about, can we prioritize things with the idea of this is easy and has the most impact versus these are the things that are expensive or not easy and have the least impact.
All right.
And having them plotted along those lines could be pretty illuminating as well.
Yeah, I remember we did something similar where it was more of a low, medium, high priority with some of those facilities projects years ago. And it was helpful. That's part of the reason that we are in the tier that we are now with these projects, because we had Ames was a huge, space issue. So that was priority number one. And I totally support the prioritization.
I think this is more than just facilities, though.
Oh,
No,
no.
definitely, yeah.
No, absolutely. No, I was just giving an example of one we used the low, medium, high, and that kind of what is really the cost benefit analysis for each of these pieces. And I would say, I think it really does have to be, besides just the action team giving us advice, I think it really should be a partnership.
Oh, absolutely.
Because, they can't do things without knowing what the board policy is going to be about our fund balance. Are we going to keep that the way it is, or are we going to encounter debt? So I'd like to see more of a tandem process.
And absolutely, that's what we're aiming to do.
Yeah.
That's what I
yeah.
meant too. I just meant I didn't want it to be board down. I wanted to make sure it was everybody working together. Yeah.
But I would-
really, goal 1 through 4 all go to goal 5, right? And
Yeah,
that's what you're
everything-
basically
right,
saying.
right.
Is so in order to achieve goal 5, we need to be very strategic about goals 1 through 4.
Right.
Yeah, and what year we want certain things accomplished, because, having the tiered year approach is obviously something that Jim would benefit from, knowing when expenditures are going to be happening, and to spread them out as much as we can would be helpful.
Right.
But sometimes it doesn't always work, but we'll see how it goes. And we have to learn about kindergarten and all that, so.
Yeah, I mean, there certainly is that aspect of kind of prioritization over 5 years. I know I said it's all important. There are things that fell off the strategic plan that didn't make it to the piece of paper, right, that were talked about in the process because they seemed like those low priority or not enough appetite for it or not enough interest in it. So I think everything that sits there is worthy of consideration. I think that's what, so again, we use the example of full day kindergarten. We agreed it's worthy of very careful consideration by both the board and the action team. So the action team is going to come forward and continue to inform the board of kind of, the challenges of half-day programming compared to full-day programming, but ultimately the board will need to sort of make the determination about costs. And I know we need to come up with the analysis of facilities. We've talked about that. We're sort of in the midst of doing that at a even more micro level now. We built the improvements that we did to sort of be able to address that. But there are things that we've been interested in. The Central Hauser campus is the other one that keeps coming up. We'd like to make those improvements, right? But we've lived a long time without those improvements. So, again, these are now hard discussions. I think figuring out sort of where's the appetite, where does it fit with policy? Maybe it's more than just policy. So I think these are really important discussions.
Yeah, and I guess the thing is too, what I'd like to do, because there's also what us call there's some soft strategic items in there. So it's like making an inclusive environment. So what does that mean? What does that look like? What's that going to involve? And so to that end, I mean, I know we've embarked on, and I'm completely supportive of embarking on the full day, looking into full day kindergarten. We've also embarked on some of the strategic, saying what's this going to cost for these strategic facility items. But these other items, I also want us to start looking at and get input from the various committees. But at the same token, I don't necessarily want us to, I don't think it's worthwhile for us to go do the in-depth research and analysis to figure out which one's important to sort of prioritize. I think we have enough information today based on all the work that has been done with the strategic plan to determine how we want to prioritize that. And get the feedback from the various committees and like what they think, and then work with, and then.
Well, I think that's the key, getting that feedback. I wouldn't say that we necessarily have that information, all the information we need today.
Right, and I think we can make the decisions without having all that information. I think we can make the decisions on what's important to us and to prioritize what's in, like, what should we try to tackle in year one? What should we try to tackle in year two?
See, I don't feel like I have that information yet to be able to make those decisions.
I don't think we'll have that information for probably 6 months.
Like looking at the key performance indicators as an example?
I mean, some of the, do you even have all of your committees, have all of your committees even met once yet?
Not yet.
You still got to build who that is and what they
Right.
are and get schedules.
Right.
And so I think it's going to, I agree with what you're saying, but I think even taking a step back from that, I think we don't even have real goals for ourselves this year. Like, we have a strategic
Right.
plan, but now I think it's, okay, so what in this strategic plan, how do we want to shape this? So like, what is our goal for getting through year one? And then year one is really year two.
Right.
Because it's probably going to take us this whole year just to set this up for years 3, 4,
Right.
2, 3, 4, and 5.
And that's I understand that, and I guess, but I'll just tell you, my concern though with this is that sort of to the point that if everything's important, then nothing's important.
Yeah.
And
But I feel like the information I know that, like, when Sherry and I.
Could you finish first? Sorry.
Yeah, thanks.
Oh.
I'm still not trying to figure out where he's at. This
Yeah.
No, I get I guess what I'm trying is that I don't want us to become spend so much time on analysis, because sometimes we can become paralyzed by, like, we need more information, we need more information, we need more information. So that's my concern, is that we figure out what is enough information, because many times it's like we're always looking for more information. So, because I guess at least I get the sense sometimes we're afraid to make a bad decision, and I don't want to be the last person to make a bad decision as well. But at the same token, I don't want to get stuck in the inertia of trying to just always make the best decision. I mean, the perfect decision. Essentially, I don't want perfect to get in the way of good, and so that's where I'm coming from.
I completely understand that and agree with that. I think in conversations that I know I've had with Martha at the Education Committee meetings, looking at the works that those action teams have started with these goals, where they're kind of sorting through that process, I just don't think we've gotten that information yet. So for me, I feel like that work is being done, like over the next few months. That's where the focus of the strategic, because it's hard to have a strategic plan and then just like, boom, let's go. We need to create the action, like the teams need to kind of start doing some assessment of what it is and what can be done and what feels super important to be able to report back to us so that we can work in partnership.
All right.
So for me, I'm just missing that. Like, I think that's coming.
Yeah, and I'll just say exploration is something you do before implementation, right? So, and that's, I think, part of why we agreed to even this modified format for committee of the whole, is that we would be bringing more regular feedback. And I know we have even just a little bit of that tonight about first kindergarten meeting. I know I'm going to talk about the family and community engagement. So again, yes, it's a process. Processes have been started, not coming to, anything yet with decision making, in terms of board decision, whether it's full day kindergarten or Blythe project or, Central Hauser campus. All these things are sort of in the investigation exploration stages. That helps.
I definitely think that's a worthwhile process that's been started, and I would like to see it brought through to completion. I can't imagine it would be pretty frustrating being on one of those committees, especially a committee that may not having met yet or not coming to a determination, and the board moves on without them. That, I believe, would be a mistake, in my opinion.
I'm not sure I understand.
Well, I'm saying that rather than, with the idea, if we're shooting from the hip, if we're making the determination on what's important at a board level, and we haven't listened to the determinations of these committees yet, I think that's what I'm saying, that would be a mistake.
Gotcha,
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
okay.
I think one thing, it's more of a tangent to these things that would help me too is, you know how we have the ESSERS money that we're temporarily using for staffing purposes, whether it's a reading specialist or a math intervention or someone like that. I think it would be useful to know if we indeed need these positions in the future, which it looks like we may, what are the long-term costs going to be for people like that when that ESSERS money is no longer eligible? And that would help, I think, tie into some of the financial considerations. Besides the facilities work, I was just thinking, because you hear a lot about, oh, that'll be paid for this year, but it would be nice to see overall what's the long-term trend. Or maybe we need more people, I don't know. But as you know, staff costs can be considerable as well, just as much as facilities, so it's something we should look at it. I would just appreciate more of a, ones we know, obviously, what are, and our data, which you'll hear about from Angela for testing has come in and is being evaluated. You may know more about more positions that we need or not. So that's just a request that I have to take a look at.
Okay, so that's where I'm coming from, and I guess the last thing that I would like to discuss, and we obviously have to get more information on this, but I do want to have a discussion with this board, and it doesn't have to be, it's not tonight, but I want to have a discussion with this board about debt, especially as we approach these significant facilities projects. And so I do want to sort of get a temperature of like where the board stands on taking on debt. I mean, how much debt are we willing to take on for some of these longer term, obviously not for staff or anything or for maintenance, but for these long-term capital projects.
Is that something that we in the future?
Oh, yeah, no, I'm not,
Think
yeah.
about that, because I'm not sure we're all prepared to have.
No, I was, no, I'm sorry if
That's a
you
lot.
didn't.
I definitely appreciate getting prepped for that. I mean,
Right.
there's, in my mind, there are two parts to that question. There's, what are the costs? That's probably something that we could find out, at least for this moment in time, fairly easily. But then the other side of it are what are the benefits? How much are those worth? What's our enrollment? Are we trending up? Are we trending down? Last I've seen, we've been trending down.
Right.
So that aspect is, that part of the equation, I think, is a lot harder to answer.
No, right, and I guess I'm not looking for like specific saying, okay, we take out X dollars for this project, but are we open to taking out debt for these capital projects? I guess that's the discussion, and I'm not asking for that discussion tonight. I'm sorry if you didn't hear me before, but I'm not asking for that discussion tonight. But I would like to have that discussion at a future
Yeah, I
board
think
meeting.
that would be great.
And just as a point of clarification, I'm sorry, Sherry,
Oh, no, go ahead, Emma.
that we wouldn't, we're not proposing that.
Right, yeah,
It is a
do understand, I'm not- yeah, right,
conversation we
right,
sort
no.
of get to at facilities advisory specifically around, and it is like the Central Hauser campus, which has sort of come to us initially with a, conceptually a very big price tag, right? But I also want to say that when we think about full-day kindergarten or additional reading specialists or math, that's operational. We would not take out debt to sort of meet the needs of students. It really becomes those extra, really kind of the narrow path of facilities, right?
Right.
So,
and the things that have like a longer lifespan. I
Yeah.
mean, you build an addition, you're going to be expecting it to last 20, 30 plus years. So it's not something like Martha said. It's not for day-to-day operations, maintenance staff or anything like that. It's for basically capital improvement projects.
I was just going to say, I wasn't on the board when the initial debt was taken up years and years ago, and I was a community member, and I remember some, but it might be helpful. I don't know who has the details about what that process was like, how much the debt was, and how long it took us to pay it off, and that kind of thing. It's something you could get for us, Jim, that would just remind us of what that looked like, and what are the comparisons today versus debt then, and how the processes worked, so we can be informed.
Yeah, we're gonna get that
Because obviously, financial things
But
have changed.
there's an
since that
opportunity,
initial.
I'm sorry, there's an opportunity cost aspect to this as
Yeah.
well, and that, if you look at District 96, and as you mentioned, we were able to write a big check for the building we're sitting in now.
Yeah.
in particular, because debt was repaid, paid off, no additional was taken on. I'm not sure the debt situation of D208, but the high school district definitely, on a financial basis, I would say that District 96 has a little bit more flexibility than they've been able to show, demonstrate over the past few years.
Sure.
Right.
I think that's definitely true.
Mhm.
Just like a little bit of background, and I've looked
Yeah,
at it
no,
just a
just
little
tell
bit.
me. Yeah.
So districts typically then work with a financial consultant, and they bring, they sort of do the analysis. There are people that specialize in doing that, and again, bring some options forward. And I believe the board at that time, 10 years ago, was presented with sort of a range of options, sort of on how to do, if to do, when to do. So certainly something, again, if there was interest in just more conversation, and even that, right? No decisions need to be made, but sort of a conversation that sort of helps people understand sort of structure and parameters. But we don't want to do that if there's not kind of an appetite for even considering those. And again, don't need to decide tonight, but I think just sort of, laying the groundwork, which is exactly what we're saying Goal 5 is about, is Goal 5 supports Goals 1, 2, 3, and 4, and making sure we understand all the flexibility we, either have or don't have, but considering a full range of options and what Goal 5 means to this board and to this district.
I think for now, we keep this at the group here because I think Jim can find has the ability to generate the information we need. We did have a presentation from, I can't remember who it was, from
I
a
remember that.
financial firm, but that was,
A few years ago.
A few years ago.
that was a perspective that was based on a lot of assumptions, and I would say they were not unbiased in what they were telling us.
That's the group that has managed our current debt.
Yes, that was the same group, but
Yeah.
they were more salesy than they needed to be, and I think that's a danger of bringing in the outside providers.
I was a young board member at that time, and I think there were more experienced hands came up with the idea of why on earth would we take on debt? We've got $40 million in the bank.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Which was a pretty easy slam dunk answer to why are we even talking to them? That
Right.
makes no sense. So
Yeah, I don't remember
do
it being
hear
a
you.
salesy pitch. I remember the same thing, thinking, why are we having this discussion when we have X amount of money? Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a very pro-debt presentation.
Well, that's what they do.
Yes.
They were
Okay.
not,
wrong.
to share their option. I don't think they were telling us. what
I
we needed to do.
understand
Yeah.
that, but
Yeah.
that's not really a helpful conversation because they're presenting one side of the story. And
It was one side of the story, and
it's a
I,
preordained
Yeah.
conclusion at that point, which is why I would rather have, I'd like if Jim can look at some of those options and
Yeah.
yeah, I would
We can
agree. I
definitely do
think
that.
that a more unbiased opinion would say, why would you take on debt? You have so much in the bank,
Right.
earning next to nothing.
Yeah, I lived here 20 years, but I cannot remember the community engagement, whether or not we were, I don't know how many were here as well, when that first debt was taken on, like how did they engage the community, how did that work? And I'll have to think about that for a while, but I would like to know maybe the temperature also in the community and how they feel. Wouldn't be a bad thing, based on our trajectory. So, let's see, just a thought.
so save additional discussion on this for later.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Unless you want to do it tonight, no.
Mhm.
Yeah,
It's
no,
a big-
later.
it's a big
it is
topic.
early
It's
still. We're not quite 8
Yeah,
yet.
no, no. Definitely later, definitely later.
What time the Cardinals on? We got to keep this moving. We can't let them watch the Cardinals.
Yeah. Okay, then let's have that discussion. So as I was saying,
Okay.
get that's, yeah.
Are we good?
Yeah, that's,
Yeah.
so,
All right.
all right.
Thanks, David. Okay, next is the Education Committee.
You want to go ahead?
Sure. Yeah, so we, Sherry and I met with Martha and Angela 2 weeks ago, and I know we've been the last committee of the whole going through the strategic plan item by item, so we're going to be focusing on the last one, which is Goal 4, which I believe Martha is the action team leader for, so I'm sure Martha has an update, but also I know Sherry mentioned later or before, there's a few other items on here that, we want to get an update for. So we'll start with that.
And I would hope most of the parents got their data if their child took the standardized, like math testing. I know my family got it, but I hope the parents should, I'm sure everyone is aware that that happened, and just let them know, you know, I love how our principal, at least at our school, just said, don't panic if you're contacted about an interventionist or something else. I think that was a good conversation, at least from our school. Me personally, just to let people know. We've been through a pandemic. We're going to really think about each child carefully, and I really appreciate the approach that Angela and Martha are taking, that when we hear about data in the coming months, that we're really going to be thinking about this in a very meticulous way, I guess. So, but we're not quite there yet, so.
Thanks. So I'll jump in. As Linda shared, I'm the goal champion and action team co-leader for the Family and Community Partnerships goal. Sarah Hickey will be my co-facilitator on this. So again, I think it just kind of helps understand a bit about where we are with the process in a number of our goal areas. We have selected a committee, the staff members to be on the committee. We've set up a potential first meeting date of October 27th. The only reason I say potential is this is the one particular committee we would like to add parents to, just given the title, Family and Community Partnerships. So I did reach out to our strategic plan original group just this week to see if there's an interest in parents from that group, but also potentially reaching out through other avenues to see if there are, again, and not a large group, probably 3 parents, one representing primary, one intermediate, and one middle school to help us think through this process. Again, with a target meeting date of October 27th, you know, the idea is that we would do some initial visioning with this group and what is the purpose, why do we look at family and community partnerships. We know that there's good evidence that having, you know, families as good partners supports student learning at the heart of it all. I know from my perspective, I think a lot about getting additional feedback and some thoughts and planning around communications. Again, I think always really a challenge for school districts is how to build two-way communication in particular. I think good solid one-way communication is important, just keeping people well informed, but again, it always is a little bit lacking without that feedback loop. So we have a couple avenues where we do that, but again, looking at might there be more opportunities. It's interesting with a teacher as a co-facilitator. I think from a teacher lens, family and community partnership is also a lot about community engagement and how do we look at those social studies standards or civic standards and make sure that students, you know, understand sort of the value of community and how they engage in the community. I think that can mean everything from field trips to also some project-based and problem-based learning. So we're going to kind of inventory the things we have in place, such as our field trips, and ways to sort of increase, improve, or enhance. And again, I think even just from a kind of quick teacher perspective is that maybe there's things we've done for years and kind of always done them, and, you know, again, going back to like what's our purpose and, you know, the relevance to students and student learning. So you also know we have another under our learning culture and environment, we have one about student-centered learning and students taking ownership of their learning, and I think there's a really nice tie-in. Again, over time, this doesn't happen overnight, but thinking through that process with this committee. So I'm excited about where this one will go, and we'll hope some parents will join us. I will go out and twist some arms if I need to. So anyway, that's kind of where this one is right now. Any kind of thoughts or questions?
No, I'm glad that you're actively seeking parent involvement, though. I think that's great.
And I think we may then do other, like, parent surveys, you know, again, other things that I've always wondered about, just even some of the events that we do in the school. And, you know, we'll occasionally get feedback from parents, this isn't helpful as a working parent, or why are we doing this? And again, I think it'll be, again, over that, as a long-range goal, a 5-year goal, to have an opportunity to kind of just reevaluate and enhance and plan. I mean, that's really the whole point behind all this, is a continuous improvement model, so.
I know this goal mostly is talking about, you know, family and community, you know, family partnerships, parents, but also, which ties into goal 5 again, is that there are also other parts of the community that aren't families or parents. So making sure that when we're talking about communication strategies, also focusing on people like me who don't have children in the district anymore. Just making sure that, you know, we are, since it is the, you know, their money as well, making sure to tie that back in somehow to make sure we are. I don't think we've ever been super successful at engaging the wider community, so it'd be great for this action team to like have those discussions as well.
Yeah. Kathy and I were just talking about that today, because we did our community report, as you know, and actually in October I have a placeholder in my calendar to consider the community report for the future year. That was kind of a process I inherited. I think it was nice. It was meant to be an outreach to all, not, beyond our sort of parent community. Again, I'd like to really try to better understand, is that an effective tool? How could we, even have more, do more? I think it's one way. Again, that's another one-way piece. So yeah, it's a great point.
There might be a degree of risk to this, but I would say, again, going back to our experience with this building itself, I know that some of the neighbors that we have definitely had some things to say about the project that's happened here, and I wonder, does that make sense to engage some of our neighbors, not only here, but at some of the other schools as well, just to hear some of these things in advance before we start down the road of a project or whatever we may start down the road of.
I know that the case at Hollywood, when we had those brainstorm sessions, just sitting in the gym with individuals from the community, who have been here for a long time, and that was perhaps some of the first times that I've seen them engage, because it involved obviously the HCA, et cetera. But yeah, I think there would be value in that. I know I saw other community members engage when it had to do with kind of the proximity to their physical location within the district.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I remember going to one of the Hollywood ones, and I was really actually impressed that they have so much knowledge and so many. It seems like maybe this is most of the villages too, but in that Brookfield Hollywood area, those residents had a really great understanding of the parking. We had such parking issues, and they had some creative ways that they, thought that we could do things. And I did really appreciate, because they don't always come to our meeting, but that was, I think, a really neat thing that we did those building outreaches. And so yeah, I totally agree with that.
And I think that's part of the challenge, right? There was an urgency to that one, and it really did attract, really valuable conversation. And I think school districts, we feel challenged by that. We don't want to keep creating urgency necessarily, but how do we get that feedback? So I know, and we've sort of not been involved since the pandemic, but I'm part of the Lions Club. They've actually asked Kim Hefner to be part of Kiwanis Club now as the principal at Hollywood School. So again, also just thinking through those community outreach opportunities that we may have as the school district representative.
Yeah, because those are great avenues for people to be able to engage with you who don't, who aren't getting your emails or paying attention to school from the age per se. So yeah, those are great opportunities.
But welcome ideas that may occur to you, and just, even, I know you all hear from your neighbors too that, may or may not have children in the school district. So, and you provide a lot of that feedback to me, and I appreciate it.
Joel and I should probably be in charge of that feedback. We're the two without children in the school district anymore.
See, I try to talk to parents with children. So that
I'm kidding.
You just have more, that's always option.
When I first joined the board, I never thought I'd be the one without the kids on the school board. It's a very different role.
Well, and imagine the ones that have never had a child in the district but are still paying their taxes, and they get that sheet that comes home and they say, what are you doing with the money? And I think that's really a gap that we could try and reach. Because imagine, you've already been through it and sort of have an idea of
and I sit
what
at this
happened.
table.
Yeah, and it feels different even now. Imagine if you didn't have anybody.
I have gotten that question.
Yeah.
We're, like in the community report, one of our sort of objective is, whether it comes out clearly enough, is, how are the children doing and how are we spending the money? So yeah, at the core of it, those are very important.
All right, so moving on, I think, Angela, were you going to come sit at the table with us to talk about the previewing the Illinois State Report Card?
Good evening, everybody. So this year, the Illinois State Report Card is coming out in 3 phases. Normally, it's come out in 1 phase, just at the beginning of November, but because districts were given the opportunity to take assessments in the fall of this school year or the spring of last school year, they're not able to compile all the data in a timely fashion to be able to have a release, just 1 release at the beginning of November. So the first release will be coming up here October 29th, and that's going to be all of the non-assessment data. So it's things like our financial responsibilities, our school finances, our evidence-based funding, our student enrollment, our ethnic racial diversity, all of those items on the school report card that don't require testing data. And then on December 2nd, that will be the second release, and that second release will have data, school assessment data for those districts that tested in the spring. So that will be us. It will include our IAR data and our early learning data. So that's our kids assessment that we do. And it will be reported at the school level and the district level because they won't have the spring or the fall testers. They won't have their data to compile the state level data. So then the final release will be April 27th. It will have those assessment data, the assessment data we saw in December, as well as our access data, which is the assessment our English learners take. It'll have our DLM data, which is the dynamic learning maps alternate assessment that some of our students take in place of IAR. And it will have the Illinois Science Assessment as well. And then at that point, in April, on April 27th, at that point we'll have school, district, and state level data. So we won't be able to compare ourselves to the state until the spring, but we'll be able to see how we performed as a district in the beginning of December.
It does seem like a long time for the state data, though, to wait till the end of April, but what can you do? And nothing. Yeah.
Right.
At least we'll have our own, so like you're saying. Oh gosh.
Well, so if I understand right, so there's been a bit of a gap then between the last time we've had the assessment and now? Did I hear that right? That we took it in the spring rather than the fall?
We did take it in the spring. So we took it when we would normally take the
Okay.
assessment. In the spring, we usually take the assessments in the end of March, or starting after spring break through April. That's how we've always done it. And that's when we did it this past year. But states or schools were given the option to take it when they returned to school and take it this fall instead of in the springtime. And some districts did take the state up on that option.
So we just have to wait until they compile everybody, so. Because I guess we were, oh, do you know the proportion of who took it in the fall, the number of schools that did versus didn't? I mean, in the spring?
I don't know across the state the proportion, but I know the majority of the West 40 districts took it in the spring rather than the fall.
Okay. And maybe we could even, does West 40 give a comparison of their own district?
No, they don't.
That would be interesting to see.
That would.
Yeah.
So typically in the fall, pre-pandemic, let me say that, pre-pandemic, every fall, we would have a data presentation of all of the testing data, including the MAP testing at the beginning of the year and the IAR from the spring before. So next month, you'll be presenting MAP information, the early information you can get from the state. And so my point is we're still going to be having a conversation about testing next month, correct?
Yes, we will
Okay.
still have a conversation about testing next month, but that testing will all be local assessment. So it's going to be MAP assessment, our MTSS assessments and numbers, and talking about where we're at as a district in mathematics and language arts, and then also talking about trends that we're noting and we've seen through discussions, or I've had through discussions with NWA and MAP.
So we can still have that conversation, it just won't be including the state testing.
Correct.
Which is okay, I mean, because really, this is really our focus anyway. It is an interesting state comparison, but I mean, the state report card isn't usually something we focus on in a board
No.
meeting for a long time.
No, you're right.
So I think that's probably okay that it's delayed, but.
And then in December, after the December release, we can talk about how our local assessments compared to the state assessment from the spring and have some conversations around that as well. But we rarely do, as you're saying, Sherry, we rarely focus on the state part of the data
Right.
because we are a high-performing district that performs higher than the state average anyhow.
Any questions or comments?
Good to have that conversation when the numbers are here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I look forward to next month's presentation, just to see where, after last year and, where we're at.
Well, yes, that is the
Yeah.
big question. Where are we at?
Right.
We'll leave that to next month.
Yes.
So the next item on the agenda, I think, is also for you, Angela, am I right? Exploration, just an update on the exploration of full-day kindergarten, the action team.
So as Dr. Ryan Toy mentioned, we have had one meeting with the full-day kindergarten action team. The team consists of 13 members, myself and Ms. Gorman, the principal of Blythe Park, lead the action team. We have a number of kindergarten teachers on the team, a number of first grade teachers, English learner teacher, special education teacher, and one of our reading specialists is on the team as well, so that we have a range of points of view on the committee. Our first meeting was to talk about our charge and what our work is, just reminding the committee that we're not making a recommendation to the board, that we're coming with information from the research that we gather. And we started off with a brainstorming activity to talk about what factors support full-day kindergarten, just from our own experiences and our own thoughts, as well as what factors support half-day kindergarten, and what challenges are posed in a half-day program, and what challenges could we anticipate with a full-day program. And our plan is to then take that brainstorming activity and add to it and edit it based off of the research that we're gathering throughout this process. So just an interesting conversation to have in the beginning, to see what some of that base level knowledge is that we're coming into the group with. What else? We are meeting again next Thursday, and plan to have probably about 6 meetings between now and the end of January, at which point we hope to come back to the board in February with a presentation.
Trying not to presuppose anything, what was the most interesting insight, do you think, that came out? Or most unexpected, maybe? Or is that even a fair question?
No, it's a fair question. For me, it's hard to say what was unexpected because for me personally, there wasn't a lot of unexpected. I know that in just some of the conversations and listening to a couple of the groups that were working, there's minimal understanding of funding for kindergarten. And so there were some questions that teachers had about how it's paid for, if the district receives money, and if the district puts out a lot of money for it. And so some of the financial conversations, there was conversations around like just talking about the challenges that we would think about when moving to full day kindergarten. Not necessarily challenges, but things to consider. There were some things that came up that was like, oh yeah, we do need to think about that as well. For instance, when you think about adding full day kindergarten, we know that there would be FTE potentially added for kindergarten teachers. But there also has to be a conversation around their special area master schedule too, because it's going to impact our music, library, PE, and art classes as well. And that's not something that everybody had considered when thinking about it.
So some of the elements that might have been mentioned in the video.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah, the video was really
Yeah, that was
really telling. And the other thing was I hadn't thought of before watching the video was the lunchroom.
Yeah.
And think about our challenges now with lunch and just how we're trying to ensure social distancing and such. It was like, oh yeah, we're going to end up adding a couple of classes to the lunchroom too. So.
Oh, one thing that I would, maybe I'm the only one, but is there any way to find out how kindergarten instruction has changed, if at all, in like the last 10 years or 20 years? You know what I mean? Because I was wondering, since we're, like the research given was 2006, and it's really good. It's got so much, it was really, really in-depth and a thoughtful, research process. I was just wondering, because I don't remember, even for my own kids, really, what has changed, if anything, in the way that we teach, and does it change the need for all-day kindergarten and a push that we need it? You know what I'm saying? Is there anything that's
I
more?
would have to look into that, but can you just, when you say how has it changed, like
I'm
the
just saying
focus, or what do you
instructionally,
think?
like, is there anything that we do now? Because obviously we have different standards now. We have movement breaks. We have ways of teaching that are different. I was just wondering, does any of that play into, the need for kindergarten to be all day or not?
Sherry, is your thought that the article being from 2006, maybe is there anything more recent? Or?
No, I totally liked what it said. It made me think, because it was saying based on, processes that we do in class now, and I was just wondering, it made me think, not to criticize the article, it was great. It just made me think what has changed, if anything, because my kids are, even my oldest is 8, and I don't even remember changes from my other one, if any. I was really just a rhetorical question. Has anything really changed in the way that
we work with the kids and what would all they do for them?
I think one of the things that jumps out to me, just having had a long view of it, is, you know, when the Common Core State Standards came out, which really aren't so new anymore.
Right,
But there was a moment, I think, for a lot of school districts, is would the rigor of the Common Core State Standards fit within a half-day program?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think in terms of, like, I'm trying to think of what maybe has changed.
Yeah, because I'm not in that kindergarten
Yeah.
classroom, the way, like from when my oldest is 16, it was, even then things have changed, I noticed from my first one, but I'm not in there every day. I was just wondering if the teachers had any insight on what would be useful in an afternoon. Will you do this in the morning, what's missing that we can add, or, you know what I'm saying? I'm not saying it very well, I'm just wondering, has anything changed instructionally that would push one way or the other?
I know that as time has moved on, one of the things that's changed is just the focus on social emotional learning and maybe also social, like social dynamics, social instruction too.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And I think even now, you know, even now we're sort of living, I think, a really, you know, heightened awareness of how important social emotional learning is in a school. It's always been important for kindergartners too, but yeah, I think just the time dedicated to it.
It's something that has always been important for kindergarten students, and we are seeing even more so the importance of that given the pandemic. The thing that has been noted across all 4 elementary schools is that our kindergartners are like preschoolers. They have very, very basic skills right now. Our kindergarten teachers have just been like, by this time of the year, pre-pandemic, we were doing stations. They were able to work independently for 5 to 10 minutes, and we're not there yet. We're still focusing on bathroom breaks and self-care and just the things that a number of our students would have come to us knowing already.
Right, because they do those, I do remember something about preschool where they do those stations, but a lot of them didn't get to go last year because they had to be at home. And can you imagine what they didn't get to do, those regular practices where you go to circle time and you sit and you listen for school.
And even those who were in school didn't get these small group stations, circle time, because everybody was concerned with social distancing.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. No, it was really just I was saying it badly, but I was just curious instructionally if anything has changed. Because, you know, the older grades, of course, the standards have really changed how they teach, but I'm not in that kindergarten class. Thank you.
The one thing I looked, like reading that article, the history of kindergarten was really interesting to see how quickly it's changed. And even in 2006, it was saying about 50% or full day, half day. I would love to know what
it is now.
Statistics are now, because it's not 50-50. It's interesting to be able to add the next 20 years of, or 2006, the next 15 years of
We'll round up.
Well, of course, and then they talked about like the West having the least useful need for a full day kindergarten versus the others. Or I thought that was very interesting, but now it probably is very different. So yeah, that would be neat to know comparisons.
How some of those have changed.
Yeah, how that's changed.
So I do think it would be an important thing to know as we're moving forward, which I'm sure you're gathering, or your team will be gathering, is, you know, like just what are the norms, like, it's not 50-50 anymore, what is it? What are the norms? Because I think that's a big part of the conversation is, you know,
Well, thank you. This will be interesting. Every month we'll probably learn a little more.
Probably.
Yeah.
We are meeting at least once a month. So
Yeah.
And just when we talk about even sort of action, you know, we had decided that this particular action team needed to probably move the most quickly, meet the most frequently, form first, you know, so there's been a lot to that, and that was the feedback we had really gotten from the strategic plan team. If you recall, there was a lot of sort of conversation just as the plan was being put together about they didn't want us to explore, they wanted us to implement, and we're like, no, we really need time to explore the possible implementation. So thanks, Angela and Kazmira, for, we talk about the plan a lot at our leadership team meetings, as we should, and we always say, and kindergarten needs to move more quickly in terms of the action team's work.
Oh, one last thing. Didn't you tell us at the education committee planning meeting that there was, I think, even a preschool teacher in there? Early
did
honors?
tell you that,
Yeah,
yes.
I think that's a great thing, actually, because they communicate so much, you know, how the little ones are doing before they get there, and I think that's useful to hear what they have to say. So I appreciate you including them.
Right now, they're not attending the
Oh, I
meetings
thought-
yet.
I
No,
thought they
but we're
were.
going to, if we did, that was our plan.
Oh, but
But
you
they're
hadn't
not
gotten it
attending
yet.
yet. So if they aren't attending, like if there isn't one representative at the meeting starting at the next one, then we will do a time where we have a guest. We have
Oh,
guests come
gotcha,
in
yeah.
and we'll invite them in.
Well,
so
maybe
we
we
can
were
get
just
their
talking
input.
about that we were trying to get it, but we
Yes.
didn't have it yet. Okay, thanks. But I still think it's an awesome idea.
Absolutely, we need their input.
Yeah, but I understand scheduling and things like that. Thanks.
To your point, Martha, even with the probably heightened interest in this topic, the pace you're on and the goal seems appropriate. And the early questions with the brainstorming are good look where they look like places you should be exploring and not presupposing or, really, like you said, exploring and trying to see what's out there about the topic.
Thank you.
Right, the last thing under Education Committee is the MTSS contract.
So this is a contract that Pam, Sean, and I have looked at entering into with the Illinois MTSS Network. And so through the Illinois MTSS Network, which I believe is formerly called Illinois Empower, we've been working with Carrie Harris, one of their employees, who has been working with us to better align our MTSS process and procedures. And so last year, our work was on developing a MTSS handbook for our district so that we're all following the same procedures and processes for identifying students and servicing students and supporting students. This year, what this contract entails is helping with consistent implementation of fidelity, and then also helping us with professional learning for our staff members through a train-the-trainer type model. So we're doing a lot of work, Pam, Sean, and I are doing a lot of work right now with our social workers, psychologists, interventionists, and reading specialists, and getting them comfortable with the procedures, getting them comfortable with the online platform that we'll use for keeping track of the supports that we're doing and the fidelity and the success or lack of success of those supports. And so once they're comfortable with it, then we're going to roll it out to the classroom teachers, but we're going to do that with the psychologists, social workers, and interventionists and specialists, so that it's us training then the classroom teachers and helping the classroom teachers become comfortable with their role in the process. So this contract is about the professional learning piece of implementing MTSS with fidelity and doing that through a train-the-trainer model so that we're able to sustain the work that we're doing.
When would the trainers meet with the staff then? Or is that in those after-school professional development opportunities, or when are you planning for that?
So like for the psych social workers, and Pam and I continue to remind the staff members that this process is actually a multi-year process.
Okay.
So this first year is about helping with the comfort level of,
Gotcha, with the trainers.
right. And then next year is when we would look at
Okay.
bringing the teachers on board. Right now, a lot of the work that the teachers will be doing in the future years is falling on the interventionists and the specialists and the psychologists, but we'll then slowly, gradually release
Okay.
that work to the teachers starting probably next year.
Okay.
And then we'll be able to utilize our after-school professional learning time for that, as well as some just on-the-job learning when they're in their trimester-like data meetings as well.
Okay, so yeah, it's a gradual trainer. I totally understand that. They need time to absorb.
Oh, yes. And right now, if we were to ask the teachers to start doing any of this,
They probably.
I don't know what would happen.
Yeah, okay. Thanks.
It's interesting that it's through the Regional Office of Education of the other counties, Lee Ogle. What is that? Were they the first regional office to really develop a program?
So that is a great
And-
question, and I think I'm going to ask Pam if she'll come up and help me because she has knowledge of the Illinois MTSS network as well.
And if it needs a future answer, that's fine. I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
I always think of the Regional Office of Education, where you bring all your paperwork and you get finalized. It's interesting to think about them in this context with other services.
So the MTSS network originally began as an RTI network years ago when it was considered response to intervention. And that probably was 20 years ago. And it became a committee of Illinois State Board of Education, and there's a lot of training throughout the state. And then since then, it has morphed into other things. There are also other groups that were part of state initiatives, such there was an autism project, and those things morphed into more of Illinois Empowers, and now it's part of that. So it's, over the years, it's kind of grown into other things so it can spread out more and help more districts.
Thank you.
Is there any questions for either of them? Thank you, ladies.
Well, sounds great.
Thank you. All right, education's done. Passing it to Wesley.
Is
Personnel.
that a mic drop or what is that?
I think that was in mine.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is it to me, Dan?
It's on you.
Yeah.
Linda gave it to me, but.
Yeah, I know, I should have said, passing it to Dan.
I don't really have any major updates for today. Martha and I did meet Monday just to talk about some ongoing agenda items for future discussion related to a number of different things. Just a few admin things coming up. Some stuff that'll be more like closed session, like personnel things that will be more closed session. The Eklund contract and kind of like next steps with the Eklund contract, and then just personnel focused stuff around like full day kindergarten, what kind of impacts that might be, and just with some of the changes we're talking about that we discussed earlier with Life 2 section and other things like that. Just how does that impact staffing and staffing needs and staffing additions or changes or whatever that might be. So more to come on that, but we did meet Monday and future topics. So nothing else for today.
All right. And then that brings us to Policy Committee.
Yeah, pretty quiet from the policy committee. Actually makes me think of a question when I might anticipate perhaps another press release. I know the release of them has looked a little wonky over the last year, right? So I don't know if anybody who's had experience can shed light on it, but we don't have anything from the policy committee at this time, but I'm curious if anybody has insight on how and when we might expect updates from press, the next batch of updates.
A press update, I haven't heard. Kathy, have you? I have not heard anything.
They seem to, I don't know, they kind of fall from the sky.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I just wait.
There was a time where it was really, really quiet.
Yeah, I mean,
For a long time, and then all of a sudden we like got, I
Yeah.
think it was 2 or 3 like massive
Massive
loads
dumps of
in
policy,
like
yeah.
short order. It's like, okay.
Okay, well, I'll
Think
just
it's however
take it
long
then.
the lawyers take to
Now
get
you'll
them.
pay for later.
Yeah,
Exactly.
So,
Guess we'll enjoy the quiet right now.
waiting with bated breath for the next one.
As are we.
All right. Let's see, so, I don't know, what did everybody think of this new format? Can I ask,
I like
take
it.
a moment to ask this?
I like
What do
it
you
better
think?
than the last one we had, which was a little hard to see. I think this is better to see people.
Uh-huh.
There's less of a tripping hazard with all the cords.
With the course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
I think I'll like it even more when we're not wearing masks and we can actually be closer.
I hear you,
Yep.
All right. I definitely thought, it just felt like to me we had more talking, more interaction, more questions asked.
Yeah.
I think that was, great having folks here and not craning our necks around to watch a PowerPoint so much. All right. I like it though. This is great. I like this direction we're going in. All right. So then that brings us to public comment. Okay. No public comment. So we will note that future meeting dates, October 20th, regular business meeting, 7 p.m. in the multipurpose room at Ames Elementary School. Board will enter into closed session at 6:15 p.m. 6:15 p.m. we'll note, if necessary, and return to open session at 7 p.m. November 3rd, 2021, Committee of the Whole, 7 p.m. in the multipurpose room at Ames Elementary School. November 17th, 2021, regular business meeting, 7 p.m. in the multipurpose room at Ames Elementary School. Board will enter into closed session at 6:15 PM if necessary, return to open session at 7 PM. And if there is nothing else, this meeting is adjourned.